Louisiana. She's the exception and never the rule. She's a mystery that asks not to be solved, but simply to be experienced. Louisiana, where you can come as you are and leave different. Additional funding is provided by the Friends of Louisiana Public Broadcasting and the Foundation for Excellence in Louisiana Public Broadcasting.
This is the story of the Cajun people of Louisiana. It's a story that begins nearly 400 years ago, when French peasant farmers left Europe to carve a new homeland in the wilderness of Nova Scotia. After a brutal ethnic cleansing, the ancestors of the Cajun people were scattered around the world. They were able to end their exile and reunite their families here in Louisiana. People would have been brought down to this area, and this dry creek would have contained water, and they were loaded into the boats and brought down to the Minas Basin, where they would have been loaded on the transports and taken away from their homeland forever. European settlers came to this place over 400 years ago. It's amongst the most fertile and beautiful farmland in all of North America. Today it's called Nova Scotia. But to the original French settlers, this place was called l'Acadie. In 1604, 16 years before the Mayflower Pilgrims landed at Plymouth Rock, French colonists came to Acadie and established one of the first permanent European communities in North America. Acadie's early years were precarious, but beginning in 1632, the first families began to arrive at the Port Royal settlement. Over the next 20 years, some 60 families came to make Acadie their home. These were the ancestors of nearly all the Acadian peoples of Canada and Louisiana today.
These people already knew each other. Somewhere around 60% or so of the people who became the Acadians came from the same neighborhood, from around a 20-mile radius around one little town in northern Poitou. They already knew each other. They already had a sense of identity, a sense of community, a sense of society. And essentially, this little society was uplifted and boated over to what we now call Nova Scotia, what they called l'Acadie, after the name that the Micmac Indians used to call the place.
The colony grew rapidly, spreading outward from Port Royal to Grand Pré, the Minas Basin, Beaubassin, and Chignecto. Small families expanded into large clans. These clans formed the base of Acadian society.
The family was so important for those people that there couldn't be a country, there couldn't be a people if there was not basically the groups of families that were all related to one another. So they kept on helping each other to survive. For instance, if one man named Cormier would die, then the Leblanc would take over the kids, but keep the name Cormier so that the descendant of that man would know where they came from.
From the early start of the 17th century, when Acadia appears on the map as a small French colony, the French inhabitants that later on would be known as Acadians really had no choice but to take care of their own affairs. France was far away. The major French settlement in the area was also far away in the St. Lawrence Valley, which is now Quebec.
The Acadians, or at least the colonists, French colonists who colonized the Bay of Fundy Basin, were refugees from the very bloody, very intense religious civil war that plagued France for almost a century, from the early to mid 1500s up until and culminating in 1628, the fall of La Rochelle. Much of the warfare, much of the worst fighting took place in northwestern Poitou province, and the Acadians, who were peasants in that area, were caught in a military crossfire.
As generations passed, memories of the mother country began to fade. Isolated from France, the Acadians began to think of themselves as an independent people, evolving a culture and a way of life uniquely their own, developing a distinctly North American mentality.
The Acadians were the first group of European settlers in the New World to use a name for themselves that no longer had anything to do with the Old World. They were profoundly North American. They were what my colleague Mate Alain refers to as Homo Americanus, the first example, in fact, of that new species.
Work was done as a community, whether it was building their homes, harvesting crops, even holding back the encroaching seas. Through an elaborate system of dikes and sluices, les aboiteaux, the Acadians reclaimed over 13,000 acres of saltwater marsh and turned it into the richest farmland in America.
French Acadia was mostly in what is now Nova Scotia, around the Bay of Fundy. There is where you would have found the great majority of Acadian villages. And the great majority of the inhabitants of those villages were farmers. And they put together sort of a very original way to share croplands by building dikes, sort of to take from the sea a special kind of harvest. And in French, they would call these systems aboiteaux. This made them very prosperous farmers that had to work together, because at low tide they could work in the fields, but if the tides, especially the tides of the Bay of Fundy, which are one of the highest in the world, when the big tides would come in, they would have to fight the tides away by building these dikes.
But it was not just the sea that was threatening Acadie. The Acadians had built a prosperous, independent homeland. Fish and game were abundant, their orchards were bountiful, trade with their neighbors was lucrative. Epidemics like smallpox, typhoid, and cholera were unknown in Acadie. They lived as well or better than anyone else in North America. But what the Acadians had, others would soon try to take away.
This is the Minas Basin.
And how many families are in Chignecto?
200 families, sir.
And how many families in Cobequid?
Cobequid?
Less than 10 years into the colony's existence, Port Royal was burned to the ground by English forces from Virginia. This was only the beginning. The French and British were trading pawns in a deadly game for the possession of North America, with Acadie as the key strategic prize. The colony had changed hands 10 times in the first 100 years of its history before finally being ceded to the British in 1713. It was an uneasy peace, the French ready to retake Acadie, or Nova Scotia as the British called it. The Acadians, however, did not care about the color of the flag that floated over the governor's house.
The Acadians had learned over the years that for a while they might belong to France, and for a while they might belong to England, and then they would return to France, and then they would return to England. They had learned by that experience to not place a whole lot of stock in who owned the colony at any given moment. While they belonged to, during the periods they belonged to England, they didn't stop trading with New France, and during the periods that they belonged to France, they didn't stop trading with New England.
When the British took control of Nova Scotia, many of them wanted to get rid of the Acadians altogether, but they couldn't. Not just yet, anyway.
British weren't able to expel the Acadians in 1713 simply because they were dependent upon the Acadians for their source of supply. Acadia was a backwater outpost outside of the main shipping lanes which went to Boston and Quebec. And as a consequence, the cost of maintaining a garrison from either Boston or London would have been extremely high.
So by threats and empty promises, the British spent the next several decades trying to assimilate the Acadians. Each successive governor of Nova Scotia would try to force the Acadians to swear the oath of allegiance to the British Crown unconditionally, and always they would refuse.
They learned to be very independent, fiercely independent, and to sort of disregard institutional authority from afar.
Throughout their negotiations with the British, the Acadians insisted on 3 fundamental conditions: the unrestricted right to practice their Catholic religion, full ownership of their land and property, and the exemption from having to bear arms.
They weren't as reluctant to simply pledge allegiance to the British, but they were reluctant to accept all of the factors that came along with that. One of them was that they were going to have to stop speaking French and learn English. Another was that they were likely going to have to change religions. And the most important one, the Acadians, if they were anything, they were profoundly pragmatic. The most important one was that if they became English subjects, they would have to accept to fight against the enemies of the British, which meant that they were going to have to fight against the Micmac Indians who had helped them establish themselves there and with whom they had wonderful relations. And they were going to have to accept to fight against the French.
Attempts to assimilate the Acadians had failed, and the military situation was growing increasingly tense as England and France prepared for yet another war. The neutral Acadians found themselves living between 2 heavily armed and hostile camps.
It's essentially a flashpoint. It's one of those areas where the 2 empires come into direct contact, and it's also where military force is brought to bear right on the common boundary line. And it's as a result of this that the area's importance is magnified, especially where the Acadian population was concerned.
It's important to understand when considering this business of the Oath of Allegiance that people often ask, why did the Acadians not sign the Oath of Allegiance? Why they didn't accept it? Well, the British governors were being very careful for a long time, and it's documented that they didn't want the Acadians to take that Oath of Allegiance. They didn't want to deal with that because they didn't want, they were trying to hold off and stave off enough time and not press this issue so that they didn't get the Acadians, getting a bunch of Acadians jumping across the line and going to help the French before the English were well enough established to be able to resist that kind of attack. And it wasn't until Lawrence got there that they finally felt like they had the numbers to protect the colony, and that's when they started to press it. But even then, Lawrence said in several letters, I will present to them one last time the oath of allegiance, and they will not sign this, but I will use as a pretext that they had refused it before to not let them sign it. And if they don't sign it, I shall deport them. And if they should figure out a way to accept the terms and sign it, I will deport them anyway. No matter what they did, whether they accepted or not, the plan had already been set into motion to rid the colony of these people.
His solution was nothing less than a complete ethnic cleansing of the country.
Thomas!
In a plan masterminded by Governor William Shirley of Massachusetts, infamous in his hatred for the French, Lawrence took command of 2,000 volunteer soldiers. They confiscated the Acadians' firearms and their boats, effectively neutralizing them as a military force. Still, the Acadians refused to sign the unconditional oath. On September 5th, 1755, the men of Grand Pre were ordered to report to their church for negotiations. It was a trap. Once inside, the men and boys were taken prisoner. The soldiers announced that the Acadians would forfeit their lands to the British Crown and be deported. For days, their wives and children waited at home. Some would never see their families again. This was the beginning of Le Grand Dérangement. Before it was over, Acadie would be destroyed. Many Acadians fled into hiding, and over 6,000 of them would be transported by force and scattered throughout the British North American colonies.
The British found themselves in the untenable position of being in political control of a colony they didn't actually own. The Acadians had been there for about 100 years, and they had not settled the worst lands. They were on the best lands. And British families that were coming in to settle the colony were having to go out and clear the woods and the rocks. And that wasn't acceptable to the British government. So what they did very simply was basically boat lift everybody off those lands so that they could put good British subjects on them.
Things are now very heavy on my heart and hands. It hurts me to hear their weeping. I'm in hopes our affairs will soon put on another face, and I rid of the worst piece of service yet ever I was in. John Winslow.
You will use all the means proper and necessary for collecting the people together so as to get them on board. If you find that fair means will not do with them, you must proceed by the most vigorous measures possible, not only in compelling them to embark, but in depriving those who shall escape of all means of shelter or support, by burning their houses and destroying everything that may afford them the means of subsistence in the country. By order, Major Charles Lawrence.
It's not every Acadian that passively resisted the deportation and accepted it with quiet resignation as the stereotype has often been presented. There were some, they were a minority, yes, but there were nevertheless some for whom this exercise was completely unbearable, and they preferred taking refuge in the woods, living with the native people of the area, and actively resisting all the incursions that the British soldiers would later inflict upon them. It was under the leadership of a Joseph Brossard that was nicknamed Beausoleil.
Brossard de Beausoleil was a very hard-headed and stubborn Acadian. We know this of him because he was implicated in a few trials during the British regime in Nova Scotia. He spent many years with Mi'kmaq warriors attacking some British garrison. He was protected by well-connected Acadian uncles and cousins who dealt sort of on a daily basis with the British officials, but they never trusted Beausoleil. Beausoleil was known to have fights with Acadian men. He was accused of being the father of a child out of wedlock.
Beausoleil Brossard was the leader of the Acadian resistance, but in the end, facing the imminent starvation of his family, even he was obliged to lay down his arms and surrender. Beausoleil spent the remainder of the war a prisoner of the British.
Hello and welcome to LPB's membership campaign. I'm Chuck Paradin and I am proud to be hosting this broadcast of Against the Tide. This is the story of the Cajun people of Louisiana. It doesn't get any more special than this in Louisiana, and a special program like this, well, it's a program that informs and educates us about the history and the people of our state. Now, if programs such as this are important to you, then it's equally important for you to call in your pledge of financial support to LPB, and do it right now. It just takes a moment. Call us or text GIVE to 888-769-5000. Go online at lpb.org, or now you can simply scan that QR code you see on your screen. Regardless of your giving level, LPB will be able to use your generous donation to produce even more programs about Louisiana. In fact, very exciting, we're going to tell you about how you can become a founding member of LPB's Louisiana Production Fund. Now, in just a moment, we're going to tell you all about that, but right now, let's hear about the thank you gifts we have for your pledge of support during this broadcast.
For $15 a month, receive the Against the Tide combo, which includes the book The History of the Acadians of Louisiana by Zachary Richard. Rich in archival images and captivating photography, the book is a guide to the Cajun experience in Louisiana. Plus, a set of mugs featuring the Acadiana flag, and a DVD of the documentary you are watching, Against the Tide, the story of the Acadian people. For $10 a month, receive the book The History of the Acadians of Louisiana by Zachary Richard. Or for just $6 a month, receive a DVD of the documentary you are watching, Against the Tide, the story of the Acadian people. In addition to these wonderful gifts, you'll receive Visions, LPB's monthly program guide, Louisiana Life magazine, and our popular member benefit LPB Passport. Stream the best of LPB and PBS anytime, anywhere.
And right now I am so pleased to be joined by someone I've known for a long time. We won't say quite how long, but a long time, because we're both from Ville Platte. Got roots there, Cajun country, Cajun French. And this is Amanda Lafleur, and she is a specialist in the Cajun French language and history. Amanda is a former French educator, a longtime LPB collaborator, and also a vice president of CODEFIL, the Council for the Development of French in Louisiana. Welcome. Good to have you here.
Je suis content d'être là.
Oh, merci bien. Tell us about some of the things that are going on here with you and LPB in the French language. How are we doing?
Well, you know, the collaboration that I've been involved with goes way back. And in fact, a lot of it, if people want to find out about it, would need to go to the website and check out LPB's archives, because that's where we have housed some historical treasures, I think, that are part of exactly what LPB is all about. That is documenting the language and culture of our area. In particular, the plays of the Théâtre Cadien, notably La Table des Veuves, and let's see, there's Gros Bec, quite a few fun plays that were done by the Théâtre Cadien on tour throughout Louisiana, but then documented right here in LPB studios.
And when you and I were growing up in Ville Platte, Evangeline Parish, South Louisiana, Cajun country, so many people still spoke only French.
Correct.
That's kind of a dying breed if they haven't already died out, but getting people to be bilingual and still speak French, Cajun French, to stay with their heritage there. How are we doing there? Is it dying? Is it coming back?
Well, you know, Louisiana French is still around, and of course it's not being transmitted in the traditional ways that it used to be, which was the time when our grandparents did not speak English well enough, so we had to learn some French to be able to communicate with them. Now the schools have taken on that role. I think we've got some exciting things going on in Louisiana with our French immersion programs, our bilingual programs, and our second language programs. LSU, where I taught, actually teaches Louisiana French, as do several other universities in the state.
That's fantastic.
And we've got it institutionalized.
And where else in the United States, maybe in the world, is anybody bringing the Cajun French heritage and language to the people more than Louisiana Public Broadcasting, constantly, like the program that we have tonight? We also have, you know, you help us program this. You help us to bring this kind of thing by giving us the money through your donations, your pledges, by going to 888-769-5000. And it's a good time to do it because right now we have the Member Challenge from Philip and Mary Ellen Jubin of Baton Rouge. They are proud to support LPB's Louisiana Production Fund, and they're challenging all viewers to donate tonight, and they're going to match dollar for dollar the first $1,500 that you pledge. So and you call in during this program, only during this program. So do it now. It's real important. And you know, even after we finish talking and the program's on, you can still get on the phone and make that call or go online. You know, this is going to make your donation worth twice as much to LPB, and it's going to help us produce more documentaries that celebrate Louisiana's food, music, our scenery, our cultures, and traditions, all the things that you love about our great state, and that make our state a true treasure, a treasure to the world, and we can't
and
lose
hopefully
this.
there'll be plenty of programming that has to do with our language too while we're at it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, this is an exciting piece of news. I hope that all people who are interested in promoting Louisiana French will call in and consider that, because I think becoming a founding member of such an organization is positive.
And as
very
we
positive.
continue to watch this program, you actually appear in, I think, the last segment of the program.
Of Against the Tide?
Yeah.
Yes, and my daughter has a cameo too. She was 3 years old at the time, but yeah, it was a lot of fun being part of that production.
Okay, many ways to say thank you at LPB, to LPB, by making that pledge, and we want to say thank you to you, and here are some of the ways we can do it.
For $15 a month, receive the Against the Tide combo, which includes the book The History of the Acadians of Louisiana by Zachary Richard. Rich in archival images and captivating photography, the book is a guide to the Cajun experience in Louisiana. Plus, a set of mugs featuring the Acadiana flag, and a DVD of the documentary you are watching, Against the Tide, the story of the Acadian people. For $10 a month, receive the book The History of the Acadians of Louisiana by Zachary Richard. Or for just $6 a month, receive a DVD of the documentary you are watching, Against the Tide, the story of the Acadian people. In addition to these wonderful gifts, you'll receive Visions, LPB's monthly program guide, Louisiana Life magazine, and our popular member benefit LPB Passport. Stream the best of LPB and PBS anytime, anywhere. Support LPB with a pledge of $1,000 or more on a credit card right now, and you'll receive the Cajun Food Tour for up to 14 people. Hop on the cozy, customized tour bus to discover the history, experience the culture, and best of all, sample fabulous Cajun cuisine. The Cajun Food Tour takes you off the beaten path and includes 5 tasting stops at locally owned Cajun restaurants in the Lafayette area. Plus, receive all gifts from tonight's show.
Well, keeping the French language in Louisiana alive is a full-time job. Menda, you spent a whole lifetime doing it. Tell us about some of the things you've done in collaboration with LPB and others to keep the French language alive, French history alive, French traditions alive.
Well, one of my favorite memories, I suppose, is working with the French language program En Français. James Fontenot was the regular host, but I was fortunate enough to be able to pitch in and help him out or replace him when he had to go to court. And he was a lawyer, of course, so he wasn't going to court for any nefarious reasons. It was his profession. But a couple of collaborations that I really, really enjoyed were working on a whole series on Louisiana's French-speaking parishes. And so it was actually getting out in the field and interviewing people. We actually went to Evangeline Parish. I interviewed Mr. Jack Miller, for example.
Oh, yeah.
And he gave us the secrets of his barbecue sauce recipe, tout en français.
Ah.
That was a really special memory for me.
Did you drop by the radio station, the only one in the parish, KVPI, where they still do French news?
We did talk
French
to Jim
music?
Swallow.
Jim Swallow, the man who hired me into broadcasting.
Wow, got you
many years ago, in the
started, huh?
1960s. Yeah, they
That's
still
right.
do it today, and they still do on Saturdays. They broadcast live from Mamou on Main Street at Fred's Lounge.
That's right.
All the music, and people are dancing there 7 o'clock in the morning. It's really terrific. So much tradition in Louisiana. And I don't know anybody who's doing more right now, certainly in a broadcasting way on television, to bring you that tradition and to keep it alive than LPB, Louisiana Public Broadcasting. And now with the establishment of the new Founders Fund, which you're going to be a founding member of, it's going to be terrific. So there's more to come, but you make it happen by being a member of Friends of LPB, 888-769-5000. Now, back to that program.
Locked in the cargo holds of the prison ships, there was no sanitation, no sunlight, not even room to move. Many of the exiles would die of hunger and disease before they ever saw land. The Acadians were scattered throughout the American colonies, from Massachusetts to Georgia, but wherever they went, it was always the same. They were unwelcome aliens, hated for their French language, their Catholic faith, and their refusal to be absorbed by the Anglo-American culture.
Quand les Acadiens ont été déportés, l'idée de Charles Lawrence, c'était de disperser ces gens-là en petites poches de société pour qu'il y ait plus un peuple qui s'appelle Acadien ou qui se considère Acadien, mais ils avaient mal compris la profondeur de ce sens d'identité qui avait commencé à cause du fait que c'était des gens qui se connaissaient déjà avant de partir, même de la France. Donc, quand ils ont essayé de les disperser pour briser la société, rendu là, en 1755, c'était impossible. Le sens d'identité était déjà trop fort.
Nearly 1,000 exiles were sent to Maryland. Within a few years, their number had dwindled by as much as a third. Their kinsmen in Virginia faced even greater trials.
These exiles contracted smallpox, one of the two great scourges of the 18th century, a disease they hadn't encountered in predispersal Acadia. So as a consequence, when they arrived in Virginia, the colonial government refused to allow them to debark. They remained aboard the ship in quarantine, and the disease just decimated the ranks of the exiles. It was eventually decided by the government that they should be shipped elsewhere because they would never be given entry because of the epidemic. So the ships were ordered to sail for England, and during the passage, 2 of the ships sank. The survivors made their way to England, the British seaports, where they were placed in detention centers. Those who did survive were sent by the British to French seaports in 1763.
During the exile, the dislocation and loss of life was so great that the Acadian population of both the Canadian Maritimes and Louisiana combined is but a small fraction of the 7 million demographers estimate it would be today had the Grand Dérangement, the deportation, never occurred.
The Acadians had a remarkable communications network during the exile. At the height of the dispersal, there were Acadians living in France, there were Acadians in the Falkland Islands, Acadians in the northern coast of South America, in the West Indies, scattered along the eastern seaboard, in Quebec. The fact of the matter, though, was that the Acadians were able to communicate with one another. Each of these communities managed somehow to communicate with relatives elsewhere in the world.
Acadians began arriving in Louisiana from the British colonies, especially Maryland and Pennsylvania. Nearly a generation later, the largest group, the Acadian exiles in France, immigrated as a community. The Spanish government in Louisiana provided each Acadian family with land, tools, seeds to plant, and a musket. The settlers began building farms and cattle ranches, and within a few years they had achieved a quality of life comparable to the one that they had left behind in Acadie. Beausoleil Broussard had led his people to this fertile grassland in the spring of 1765. That autumn, he was laid to rest. But he had lived to witness the founding of a new settlement, a new homeland, and the birth of a new Acadie. The Acadians had to adapt to the subtropical climate of Louisiana. It changed the food they ate, the crops that they grew, the way they built their houses, and even the clothes they wore. But in many ways, Nouvelle Acadie was not unlike the old.
The people who became the Acadians when they came from France, they didn't forget everything they knew. And they didn't forget, the way they lived when they crossed the Atlantic, just as they didn't forget what they had developed when they came down to Louisiana after the exile. They had a way of building houses, they had a way of cooking, they had a way of, they had songs they sang, they carried in their collective memories, stories they told.
Ils m'ont appelé vilaine avec mes sabots d'Ondaine. Oh, oh, oh.
The women were so important that they were really the link between the ancestors and the future generation. They had to give to the people that were going to come out of that group. They were just a tiny group at the beginning. And now today we're a people. Where did we get all what we know, our memory? We got it from the transmission given by the women. They would teach the children also how to be French in an English colony, how to remain something that had been great one day. And they were coming here in America, transplanting an ancient culture to a new world.
When Acadian women married non-Acadian men, they acculturated them into their own French-speaking community. The children of these outsiders became French-speaking Acadians. This was especially true after the Civil War. But rather than diluting Acadian identity, this served to enrich and to diversify it. And that's why today we have Cajuns with family names like Romero, Shake Snyder, Huffpower, Reed, and McGee.
When the Acadians arrived, all of the exiles arrived with virtually nothing. But over the following century, you see the accumulation of wealth in the hands of certain families. And these families, by the time of the Civil War, are some of the most wealthy families in South Louisiana. The vast majority of Acadians, however, remained petits habitants, or essentially yeoman farmers. pursuing a way of life that had changed little from the time of their forefathers. So you see two polar extremes developing in the Acadian community, two distinct communities emerging by the time of the Civil War.
Il y avait des Acadiens qui avaient monté l'échelle sociale, arrivé jusqu'à la guerre de sécession. Et il y avait des plantations et pour eux, la guerre voulait dire quelque chose. Mais la plupart des Cajuns, les petits habitants, ils n'avaient rien à voir. Il n'y avait pas d'esclaves et ils travaillaient leur petite terre eux-mêmes et s'ils n'étaient pas là, le travail n'était pas fait. Ça fait pour eux, la guerre voulait absolument rien dire. C'était un embarras. The Civil War was a major turning point for French Creole society. They saw in the Civil War the possibility that they might be able to preserve their specificity, their Frenchness, their French culture and language, which they had valiantly tried to preserve through several rewrites of the Constitution, several renegotiations of a place for themselves in what came to be called Louisiana. With the end of the Civil War, and with the elimination of the possibility of seceding, they finally got the message, and they were not going to, they knew that they understood that they were not going to be able to escape becoming part of the United States of America and all that implied. And the language of the future was English, and the economy of the future was American, and they began to make the transition right after the Civil War. They began to send their children to English language schools, and they began to participate in the economy in a way that they had not done before. And the Cajuns, on the other hand, just very simply didn't get the message. They weren't plugged into the same economic and political and social systems.
A century before, Acadians had resisted giving their allegiance to imperial powers and refused to bear arms in their wars. Much like their ancestors, the Petits Habitants considered themselves French neutrals and took no interest in la guerre des confédérés, the Confederate War. But the South needed soldiers desperately and began conscripting Acadian farmers in great numbers.
Quand ça arrivait pour les mettre dans l'armée, il fallait les conscrire. Il fallait les forcer de rentrer dans l'armée. Et même là, arriver dans l'armée, s'ils n'étaient pas assez loin pour les empêcher de rentrer à pied, ils partaient et puis rentraient chez eux. Et il y avait tout un système qu'on avait développé, surtout dans les mèches et dans les bois, pour les cacher. Il fallait qu'ils se cachent non seulement des Yankees du Nord, mais aussi du Sud qui essayaient de les retrouver pour les remettre dans l'armée. Alors ils avaient besoin de les cacher des deux bords.
When the Union Army invaded southwest Louisiana, some Acadians greeted them as liberators. But they soon came to detest these troops as much as they did the Confederates. Union forces swept through their homeland, taking the Acadians' food, their horses, and as many as 10,000 head of cattle. Caught in the middle of a war between two American armies, Nouvelle Acadie was virtually destroyed. The Acadians had come to Louisiana nearly a half-century before it became part of the United States, remaining almost a nation unto themselves. But with the Civil War, America had come to them, and a great wave of cultural change was rolling toward Nouvelle Acadie.
The aftermath of the Civil War was really a very difficult time for the Acadian population. There was tremendous devastation wrought by the war. The Confederate Army used the area as a foraging area. The Union Army used the area as a foraging area. Both sides attempted to take food stocks and other goods out of the area, and the result was widespread devastation. As a result of the devastation and on a series of years in which there was unseasonable weather, natural disasters, including floods on the scale of the 1927 flood, and labor problems, many farmers in the area were reduced from the status of freeholders to tenant farmers.
The great majority of Acadians living in Louisiana were uneducated, poor, and alienated from an increasingly modern, increasingly Americanized society. These Cajuns, as they were called, became an object of ridicule to the rest of the country.
Dans la plupart des commentaires, aussi bien par les politiciens que par les journalistes, que par tous les gens qui ont observé les Cajuns, systématiquement, ils trouvaient que les Cajuns étaient paresseux et sans ambition. Et c'est intéressant de considérer pourquoi ils pensaient ça, parce que les Américains avaient comme une notion de l'économie qui était basée sur la progression, sur l'acquisition de beaucoup d'argent et de propriétés, alors que la grande partie des Cajuns, la plus grande partie des Cajuns, c'était simplement des gens qui étaient tout à fait heureux de faire leur petite ferme, donner à manger à leur famille, juste avoir assez pour faire la vie.
The Cajuns were viewed as little different from the destitute immigrants arriving in America at that time, even though their families had been in Louisiana since well before the American Revolution. Much like the British over a century before, the Anglo-Americans felt that the best way to deal with the Cajuns was to eliminate their culture and to assimilate them.
All over the world, there was this fierce nationalism that was causing countries to regularize language teaching and regularize social and cultural behavior. In America, you had Teddy Roosevelt saying, there is room for but one language in this country, and that is the English language, for we must assure that the crucible turns out Americans and not some random dwellers in a polyglot boarding house. He was also saying things like, there's no such thing as a hyphenated American. There's no such thing as a French American or a German American or a Spanish American. He said, if you feel French or German or Spanish, go home. We have something new happening here. And this nationalist movement led to the well-known story in Louisiana of outlawing French in the schools at the same time as free, mandatory public education was made available for the first time in the history of the Acadians. So for the first time in their history, they find themselves obliged to go to school, and in the same motion, forbidden to speak French in those schools.
The most profound change in Acadian society in the early 20th century was the result of the compulsory education law of 1916. Cajun children were ridiculed and beaten in schools in a systematic effort to eradicate their language. An entire generation of Cajuns was taught to believe that their French-speaking culture made them inferior to other Americans.
These kids were being told at school that the language they learned at home was not only useless, it was a social problem. It was a stigma.
J'ai été né à parler français. J'ai appris l'anglais quand j'ai été à l'école. Je me rappelle comment m'a essayé de me commencer à me montrer de certaines paroles en anglais que fallait je connais quand j'ai commencé l'école. Pour moi, c'était assez dur. Je n'aurais jamais pu apprendre ça. Je dis, maman, je ne pourrais jamais apprendre ça. C'est trop dur pour moi. Et on ne pouvait pas parler français naturellement sur la cour d'école. Si le principal les attrapait. Mais on se cachait, on parlait en français. Oh, ils autres, tu comprends? Si on voyait les maîtresses venir ou le principal, ouais, naturellement, on se taisait.
C'est mon père parlait seulement en français, ma mère parlait seulement en français. J'avais un vieux oncle qui avait venu rester avec nous autres. On parlait seulement en français. Tous les voisins, tous les petits amis, quand on revenait de l'école, on parlait en français. On parlait en français dessus la cour de l'école quand ça ne nous attrapait pas.
Ouais, si ça nous attrapait après parler français, on n'était pas baptisés. La première fois, ça nous attrapait. Plus ou moins, on était punis. Des fois, on avait des lignes à écrire, qu'on n'aurait pas parlé français sur la table d'école, des affaires comme ça. Mais là, si tu étais attrapé encore, des fois, tu étais bûché.
The Cajuns were not alone in the struggle to preserve their language and heritage. Their cultural counterparts The black Creoles of Louisiana shared the same experience.
Je sais qu'avec mon père et avec mes grands-parents, avec mes tantes et mes oncles surtout, ils étaient élevés à l'époque où il y avait beaucoup de pression, surtout, je crois, sur le monde de couleur, qu'il fallait que tout le monde parle anglais, que tout le monde devienne comme les Américains.
Hello and welcome back to LPB. I'm Chuck Paradin, your host this evening. You've joined us during LPB's membership campaign. This is your opportunity to show your support for Louisiana Public Broadcasting, our only statewide public television network. You can do this with a quick call to 888-769-5000 or text that number, GIVE. Text it to 888-769-5000 or by going online to lpb.org or by scanning that QR code you see on the screen. Do that with your smartphone. You know, your support now is your vote for more programs about Louisiana. Regardless of the amount of your pledge, what really is critical is that you take the time to make the call or click. You know, we're going to go to the conclusion of the program in just a few moments, but right now, take this opportunity to choose the thank you gifts you'd like to receive for your pledge of support to LPB.
For $15 a month, receive the Against the Tide combo, which includes the book The History of the Acadians of Louisiana by Zachary Richard. Rich in archival images and captivating photography, the book is a guide to the Cajun experience in Louisiana. Plus, a set of mugs featuring the Acadiana flag, and a DVD of the documentary you are watching, Against the Tide, the story of the Acadian people. For $10 a month, receive the book The History of the Acadians of Louisiana by Zachary Richard. Or for just $6 a month, receive a DVD of the documentary you are watching, Against the Tide, the story of the Acadian people. In addition to these wonderful gifts, you'll receive Visions, LPB's monthly program guide, Louisiana Life magazine, and our popular member benefit LPB Passport. Stream the best of LPB and PBS anytime, anywhere. Support LPB with a pledge of $1,000 or more on a credit card right now, and you'll receive the Cajun Food Tour for up to 14 people. Hop on the cozy customized tour bus to discover the history, experience the culture, and best of all, sample fabulous Cajun cuisine. The Cajun Food Tour takes you off the beaten path and includes 5 tasting stops at locally owned Cajun restaurants in the Lafayette area. Plus, receive all gifts from tonight's show.
Welcome back, and welcome back Amanda LaFleur, a longtime friend of LPB, Vice President of the Council for the Development of French in Louisiana, a longtime LPB collaborator, and a French educator. Very important, the work that you have devoted your lifetime to in keeping Louisiana so much alive. You know, when I was a kid and you were a kid, I knew Zachary Richard as a Cajun musician, but he's turned into so much more with his musical productions, I mean on-stage productions, and documentaries like the one that we're seeing right here. So important.
Yeah. If I think probably Zach is one of the single individuals who has been the porte-parole for Louisiana in the whole world. You know, the first time I ever heard of him, I was a graduate student in France, and somebody said, "Oh, I have tickets for you to see a concert de Zachary Richard," and I was like, "Who was that?" I didn't know, because he had gained his popularity and his fame in Europe and Canada before he did in Louisiana.
Same thing with my cousins, the Balfa brothers. Megastars over in Europe. Over here, they're still playing at the corner bar and lounge on a weekend.
Right, and the Balfas and Zach both had the heart and knew to come back home and make use of that notoriety and that fame to bring attention to the issues that were important about South Louisiana. And I think Against the Tide is just one of the crowning pieces of Zach's accomplishments.
And one of the things we see in this documentary is Zach playing with young kids who are playing the fiddle and the accordion and just dynamite.
Right.
And that's so important to the future of keeping this culture alive. Because with the influence of television and so many English things that have come into that once cut off area of South Louisiana, it's kind of going away in general, but there's still still hope. There's still footholds that we have.
That's it. We're gonna keep at it as long as we can.
Okay, and keep forgetting to tell you that this is important that you call in 888-769-5000 to make a pledge to keep these kind of programs going. And there will be more from Louisiana Public Broadcasting because we got that new special fund. Go to lpb.org online to make your pledge. And also we have a member challenge from Philip and Mary Ellen Jubin of Baton Rouge. You want to tell us about that?
Yeah, that's really exciting. This is a new foundation that they have created, and they are offering a match. Tonight, if you donate, they will match dollar for dollar the first $1,500 called in during the program. What's exciting about this specific foundation is that it is dedicated to programming about Louisiana, which would include, naturally, linguistic and cultural programming. So we think this is really, really exciting.
So call, make your pledge, and you'll be a founding member of this foundation. I mean, it's just really, really exciting. We talked about the things that have been done at LPB. There's going to be more in the future if you call and make your pledges, because that's what the money goes to. Also, you could call us and say, hey, look, I got this old car that I'm trading in. I'd rather not trade it in. I'd rather support LPB. So I want to make this donation. Call the number and say, I got a car I want to donate, and we'll take care of it from there. 888-769-5000. Write that down, because you can do that during this program, you can do it after the program, or in the weeks or months ahead, in between these kinds of programs, when we're not talking about these kinds of things. Also, this fall, we're celebrating 47 years of LPB being in existence and doing this quality programming. And Amanda, you've been a part of some of the programs and some of the collaborations that we've done with LPB.
Yes, well, in the early days, I have done some work with LPB. I think one of the most exciting things that we did was in 1985, we did a documentary on the Acadians who actually were deported from Acadie and then ended up being repatriated in France and finally back into Louisiana in 1785. It's a fascinating story, and so a whole crew of LPB folks headed off to France to discover those places where the Acadians had lived, both before they left for Canada and after the war. It's called Odyssée Acadienne, and it's still available in the archives.
Have you been able to go to Nova Scotia?
I've spent several summers there actually working.
Oh, that's wonderful. I got my family history, and I was surprised. I thought my relatives came from France, but so many of them were kicked out of Acadie up there.
So you're
and
Acadian,
ended up here.
yeah.
Oh yeah, from Grand Pré. I think Grand Pré is the same thing as Grand Prairie, next to Ville Platte over there.
Well, I mean, it's interesting because the Ville Platte Evangeline area, ironically Evangeline Parish, is not particularly Acadian. Most of us are French from further back, from Mobile and from Canada, but evidently there are some Acadian names and Acadian folks that managed to work their way in.
And as Zachary's pointed out in this program, that there are so many French, the Irish, the Germans, the Spanish names that are all melded into Louisiana because being Cajun has become more of a lifestyle and not a bloodline.
I think so. I think that for many, many people, it's a cultural phenomenon rather than simply a genealogical one.
So anyway, thank you LPB for bringing us this kind of programming, and you can help us get more of this programming by calling that number, 888-769-5000, or going to lpb.org. And we have some thank yous to you too. Let's have a look.
For $15 a month, receive the Against the Tide combo, which includes the book The History of the Acadians of Louisiana by Zachary Richard. Rich in archival images and captivating photography, the book is a guide to the Cajun experience in Louisiana. Plus, a set of mugs featuring the Acadiana flag, and a DVD of the documentary you are watching, Against the Tide, the story of the Acadian people. For $10 a month, receive the book The History of the Acadians of Louisiana by Zachary Richard. Or for just $6 a month, receive a DVD of the documentary you are watching, Against the Tide, the story of the Acadian people. In addition to these wonderful gifts, you'll receive Visions, LPB's monthly program guide, Louisiana Life magazine, and our popular member benefit LPB Passport. Stream the best of LPB and PBS anytime, anywhere.
Je regrette, mes amis, but apparently I've been saying something a little bit wrong, and this is brand new. It's the LPB's Louisiana Production Fund that you can become a founding member of by calling and making that pledge during this break.
And we want to thank Philip and Mary Ellen Jubin for getting that fund started,
yes,
too.
the Louisiana Production Fund. And we've got some other thank you gifts we can tell them about.
Well, we've been talking about Zachary Richard, and he seems to be at the center of most of these exciting gifts that are being offered during this pledge time. $180 a month, you'll get the DVD of the program you're watching, the History of the Acadians of Louisiana book, and woohoo! Isn't that cool?
Really cool.
Acadian flag.
You make it all happen by going to 888-769-5000. Now back to this fantastic program.
The arrival of the railroad revolutionized travel in South Louisiana. Before the arrival of the railroad, everything was based on water communications, primarily with New Orleans. Before the arrival of the railroad, the Prairie region had been a real backwater. The arrival of the railroad brought the late 19th century directly to the Cajun prairies. The population within a 10-mile radius of the railroad was directly affected. Many pockets of traditional culture, however, remained in the area. This was a direct result of social isolation, which in fact was a form of resistance against modernization.
But if American influences were trickling into Cajun society, nothing prepared it for the flood of change that would come with the discovery of oil.
Oil provided the strongest catalyst for change, strongest economic incentive, because a farmer could make more in one day as a roughneck in the oil industry, working in the Bosco fields, than he could working in a month as a day laborer in the area. It provided tremendous economic incentive for change. And the oil industry was dominated by Anglo immigrants, primarily from Oklahoma and Texas. Advancement in the oil industry was predicated upon one's ability to function in that English language culture. And this provides a strong economic incentive for people to move into the Anglo-American mainstream.
During World War I, during this nationalistic period with the exclusion of the French language on school grounds, punishing kids, humiliating kids, forcing them into a position where the first few weeks of school they had to wet their pants every day because they didn't know how to ask for permission to go to the bathroom in English, and they weren't allowed to ask in French. And a language that causes you to humiliate yourself in that way, causes you to be punished, write 1,000 times, I will not speak French on the school grounds, wear a sign that, calling attention to yourself as a fool. You want to distance yourself from that language as fast as possible. But then the same generation finds themselves fighting World War II. And many of them found themselves in the European theater in France. And it occurred to me that many of them that this language that they were told wasn't even real French and it was worthless worked just fine. Especially when talking to French peasants and ordinary people in the marketplace and trying to get a date with this pretty girl or get a bottle of wine or a dry place to sleep. And their superiors noticed this right away. These people can speak to the natives. And so they became interpreters.
World War II had a huge impact on Cajun society, and I'd say it's one of the three most important events in the entire sweep of Acadian history from 1604 to the present. First of all, you had all Cajun males from the ages of 18 to 36 being susceptible to the draft, so they were being picked up by Uncle Sam and being sent to camps and God knows where for basic training, and there no one spoke French. They were expected to speak English. Maybe some of these guys had never been away from their hometowns before or past the parish line. So all of a sudden they're immersed in this English-speaking world, and they had to learn to speak English in order to stay alive.
These GIs who came back home after World War II, they were the ones who were populating the bars and the dance halls, trying to dance and drink and forget their troubles. What they wanted was to hear traditional Cajun music, and they wanted to be home, and they wanted to have their traditional. And they're the ones who said, you know what? This language they told us wasn't real French. works. And they began to reconsider the whole thing. In fact, if there was a nationalistic movement associated with World War I, there was a sort of a regional movement associated with the end of World War II. This is when the Newport Folk Festival was developed. There was a celebration, a search for diversity in America. We became, as a country, afraid of all looking alike and sounding alike and being alike. And so we began to explore our own diversity. In that exploration, in the 50s and 60s, the Cajuns played a major part. The Cajuns were invited to the 1964 Newport Folk Festival. Dewey Balfa and Gladys Thibodeau and Vinus Lejeune went up there. And the feeling here was that they were going up there to get laughed at. But when they got up there, they were considered instead heroes of cultural preservation as early as the late 40s, in fact. Even before the Newport Folk Festival, you had people like Ira Lejeune, Lawrence Walker, Aldous Roger, Austin Peete, Dewey Balfa, people like that, leading a reconsideration of what was valuable in the culture and by association in the language.
While the musicians waged a war of resistance on stage, others were taking up the fight on other fronts. Politician and activist Jimmy DeMongeau founded the Council for the Development of French in Louisiana, Codeville, with a radical new mission now written into state law.
The Council for the Development of French in Louisiana had a very, in the early going, had a very elitist approach to things. It was saving French from the top down with schools and with, social clubs and that kind of thing. Whereas there was a grassroots surge that was looking to happen. And it happened under the leadership of musicians. It was in 1974 that we put together the first Cajun Music Festival. It was the first expression of grassroots support, this surge of cultural, social power that came up from the bottom and said, we are concerned about this. We're interested in this. This is important to us. And it was celebrated with music. And it continued to be celebrated with music through things like festivals and Dewey Balfa's Folk Artists in the Schools program. And eventually, Codeville married the two. Jimmy DeMongeau, the president of Codeville, was very perceptive. He noticed that language doesn't exist in a vacuum. You can't just preserve French. You have to preserve something to do in French. French has to make you laugh and dance and cry, and it has to be part of your life. So this cultural movement emerged alongside this linguistic educational movement.
French immersion in Louisiana is based on the Canadian model. The Canadians have been doing French immersion since the 60s, when Anglophone Canadians realized that their children would be at a disadvantage. They couldn't get federal jobs if they weren't bilingual the way most French-speaking Canadians were. And so it's a matter of economics there. In Louisiana, the movement was spurred by parents of that lost generation, parents whose parents did not speak French to them.
While it's not true that Cajun French is so different from what we call French that it's another language, it also is true that it has its own particularities and its own vocabulary, word choice, syntax style. And it's important, I think, to, as we work to preserve French in Louisiana, that we remember that what we're trying to preserve here is the way people here speak, and the way, because it's this language that produced Cajun music and the stories and the way people think about things. We can't just import university French from France or Belgium or Quebec or anywhere else. I think we have to be very careful to incorporate the way people speak here, and we have to respect that.
Comment s'appelle celui qui joue l'accordéon là?
Philippe.
Philippe? Ouais, c'est pas David. Ouais. Il est pas à l'entour, tu crois?
Oh, peut-être.
Peut-être. On va aller voir
Je
tout à
pense
l'heure.
qu'il est il est dans le bateau.
Ah, il est dans le bateau. Ok, ouais. On va aller au bateau tout à l'heure, nous autres, même. On va faire la chanson peut-être encore une fois. Hein? Belle Louisiane, c'est bon pour vous? Vas-y. Belle Louisiane,
Is it possible to say French in Louisiana? Absolutely.
Est-ce que le livre est sur la table?
Our last and best hope. And that is the immersion program, because it's the only thing that actually teaches the kids, gets the kids to actually speak the language, to live in the language.
Et sous la table?
Non, le livre est pas sous la table. Le livre est sur la table.
Très bien.
Yes, it is possible. Damn right it's possible.
Hey, Chajoli, Tocata, Gadgadam, on suis là dans les misères, je peux pas t'avoir, je peux plus dormir le soir, avec tous ces gens dedans, sans chagrin que j'ai pour toi, quand t'as n'oublie pas ça.
I was trying to explain to you in French, my grand-mère est morte hier soir, and you said, time out. You can take a time out. You can speak English now and tell me what's, what
And you
happened.
said no.
And the whole reason why I went to St. Anne's was because I wanted to be able to speak French with my grandmother. Big church, just the wind would blow, I could hear it creaking, and I had my dictionary. I could pray in English, but I had my dictionary trying to pray in French. And I remember thinking, you can pray in English, it's okay, but I didn't. Because I thought, if any opportunity to speak French with my grandmother, it's now.
Yeah, because now you knew she could hear you.
me.
That was a remarkable thing to do, and it represented to me I remember thinking at the time it was really an astonishing decision that you made, because your mother offered you to come home.
I said,
and you said you didn't want to go home.
No, there was no way I could. Because I knew that my grandmother wanted me to do this, and I thought if I come home, I wouldn't be finished,
Moi je suis pas comme ça, j'aime bien tous les deux.
Moi, j'aimerais connaître lui, c'est Souliers Rouges. Elle dit, elle a donné ça à quelqu'un nommé Betty Ann. Et elle m'a dit que Betty Marie, elle était petite comme ça. Et moi, je crois pas qu'elle est petite.
After nearly 250 years in Louisiana, Cajun culture is not only surviving, but undergoing a renaissance. What's amazing is not that some of the aspects of the culture have changed or even been lost, but that the Cajun people have been able to overcome exile and resist assimilation and continue to sing their songs, tell their stories, and build their levees against the tide.
Man, what a great program. Hello, I'm Chuck Paradin, and you have just seen Against the Tide, the story of the Cajun people. What an achievement for the program's producer, award-winning singer, songwriter, and storyteller, Zachary Richard. Louisiana's people make our state the unique and wonderful place we love. This break is your final opportunity during this program to pledge your financial support for the Louisiana programming you want to see more of here on LPB. Please call or text GIVE to 888-769-5000. Go online at lpb.org or scan the QR code on your screen. Pledge now to become a founding member of LPB's Louisiana Production Fund. Tell you more about that. It's going to help LPB produce more insightful historical programs like Against the Tide. You know, we have thank you gifts that have been chosen especially for this program, and let's take another look at those right now.
For $15 a month, receive the Against the Tide combo, which includes the book The History of the Acadians of Louisiana by Zachary Richard. Rich in archival images and captivating photography, the book is a guide to the Cajun experience in Louisiana. Plus, a set of mugs featuring the Acadiana flag, and a DVD of the documentary you are watching, Against the Tide, the story of the Acadian people. For $10 a month, receive the book The History of the Acadians of Louisiana by Zachary Richard. Or for just $6 a month, receive a DVD of the documentary you are watching, Against the Tide, the story of the Acadian people. In addition to these wonderful gifts, you'll receive Visions, LPB's monthly program guide, Louisiana Life magazine, and our popular member benefit LPB Passport. Stream the best of LPB and PBS anytime, anywhere. Support LPB with a pledge of $1,000 or more on a credit card right now, and you'll receive the Cajun Food Tour for up to 14 people. Hop on the cozy customized tour bus to discover the history, experience the culture, and best of all, sample fabulous Cajun cuisine. The Cajun Food Tour takes you off the beaten path and includes 5 tasting stops at locally owned Cajun restaurants in the Lafayette area. Plus, receive all gifts from tonight's show.
And en notre temps, Amanda Lafleur, a French educator, has helped keeping French culture and language alive in Louisiana, a vice president of Codafil, longtime educator. Speaking of education, I understand that LPB programs such as this are helping out in classrooms.
Sure. Well, I will tell you, Against the Tide was just standard fare for several of my classes that I taught at LSU. So that's one that I've used quite often. It's a great basic introduction to the history of the Acadians. The musical version the music accompanied version that Zach already produced in cooperation with LPB, which is called Attakapaw, is also available for members online through Passport.
That's a stage musical?
Well, it is a staged production that includes elements of the history and is complemented with music. But on the archives online, there are any number of resources that are available for students and for anyone interested in learning French independently.
LPB, they're there everywhere. They do it all. Thank you, LPB, and thank you, Amanda, and I think you can tell us about some of those thank you gifts we have for the folks who go out and call 888-769-5000 or go to lpb.org.
Yeah, some of those, of course, involve Zach's productions. A DVD of the program that you're watching tonight, Against the Tide, is available for a $72 donation. If you up that to $120 or $10 a month, you'll receive also a History of the Acadians Louisiana book, History of the Acadians of Louisiana, which is written by Zachary Richard. And for a $180 pledge, that is $15 a month, you also can receive the DVD, The History of the Acadians book, and this lovely mug with the Acadian flag on it. Yeah.
Way cool. You know, I also want to tell folks about something. This is brand new. We talked about that fund, and I tell you what, it's part of the member challenge from Philip and Mary Ellen Jubin of Baton Rouge. They are proud to support LPB's new Louisiana Production Fund, and they're challenging all our viewers to donate tonight, and they're going to match dollar for dollar up to the first $1,500 that are called in during this program only. Now, in effect, this is going to make your donation worth twice as much to LPB, and it's going to help us produce more documentaries that celebrate Louisiana's food, music, scenery, cultures, and traditions. All the things that you love and that make our state a true treasure to the world. So pledge now, become a founding member of LPB's Louisiana Production Fund. So very, very important. everything that LPB does is done for you, the viewer, and that's where we're asking you to maybe help yourself, help us to help you by going online, 888-769-5000 or lpb.org. We got thank you gifts, we told you about those, so many ways to thank you, but the real reason to do it is do it for yourself. Help us to help you. Become a producer. Help us to bring you the programs that you want, like the one we've been watching right now. Amanda, what things that are going on right now that have you excited about maybe collaborating with LPB or new things on the horizon in South Louisiana?
Well, we here at LPB, under Beth Courtney's direction, we certainly worked hard to find ways to tell the Louisiana story. And I think that was part of Beth's stated mission and LPB's mission, and I enjoyed being involved in those things early on. More recently, we have a project that is called Parole de la Louisiane, and it's about the history of our words, about our language. It's going to be a program in French that's designed to help people who are interested in learning what is it that's particular about Louisiana French that's different and why it's different. We take segments of plays or songs or video interviews, and then we analyze those words, and then we talk about how those things can be applied in the classroom for people who want to use more Louisiana French in their instruction. So that is specifically pedagogical for teachers.
Yeah, and when I learned French in college, took classes, they were all in Parisian French. But Parisian French is very highfalutin, and so to say that the language of the common people of France, of Louisiana, is it's very similar to Cajun French.
Well, there is a lot that's similar in our vernaculars. I think we've come a long way in education just in terms of opening up to the possibilities of language variety. And so there's certainly room for that in every classroom, even the standard French classroom.
We hope there's room in your heart that instead of trading your car in, donate it to LPB. Let's tell you more about that.
PBS Passport gives you access to a phenomenal library of drama, history, science, and performance programs. You can watch whenever you want with the PBS app. Passport is the most popular member benefit we've ever offered. But did you know that you can receive access to Passport by donating your car, truck, or boat? Well, you can. So put that vehicle you no longer need to good use. Go online or give us a call right now to donate it. And thanks.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for being a member of LPB. If you're not, become a friend of LPB by going online, 888-769-5000. Told you about the thank you gifts, and there are other things you get like Visions Magazine, Louisiana Life, access to Passport, which is that whole vault of past programming that, everything from Nova to I believe they even have Dalton Abbey on there too that you can watch. It's just a terrific thing, and you get it all by being a member of LPB. 888-769-5000 or going online to lpb.org. Amanda, we're wrapping things up here. I can't thank you enough for what you've done in the past and what you're doing for the future of Cajun French and Cajun culture in Louisiana, right there along with LPB.
Thanks a lot. It's been great being here.
It's been a great program. We really appreciate you. Remember, write the number down, 888-769-5000. You can call at any time, and of course, anytime you can go online to lpb.org. And thank you for being a member of LPB. And we're going to go one more time before we go to roll in of the thank you gifts that you can expect.
For $15 a month, receive the Against the Tide combo, which includes the book The History of the Acadians of Louisiana by Zachary Richard. Rich in archival images and captivating photography, the book is a guide to the Cajun experience in Louisiana. Plus, a set of mugs featuring the Acadiana flag, and a DVD of the documentary you are watching, Against the Tide, the story of the Acadian people. For $10 a month, receive the book The History of the Acadians of Louisiana by Zachary Richard. Or for just $6 a month, receive a DVD of the documentary you are watching, Against the Tide, the story of the Acadian people. In addition to these wonderful gifts, you'll receive Visions, LPB's monthly program guide, Louisiana Life magazine, and our popular member benefit LPB Passport. Stream the best of LPB and PBS anytime, anywhere.
j'ai prié, j'ai ramé, j'ai crié contre vent, contre marée. De Chignectou au Bayou d'Esch, de Grand-Pré à Grand-Mamou, j'ai marché, j'ai prié, et je n'ai jamais oublié.
Louisiana. She's the exception and never the rule. She's a mystery that asks not to be solved, but simply to be experienced. Louisiana, where you can come as you are and leave different. Additional funding is provided by the Friends of Louisiana Public Broadcasting and the Foundation for Excellence in Louisiana Public Broadcasting.
This is PBS.